BIP of Bizarre Interest Productions. When you guys are getting this, I should be done with the Boruto 2 Blue Vortex review for chapter 34, so I'd be heavily grateful if you all decided to check that one out. But like last month, I wanted to talk about Rock Lee and Metal Lee. Partially because it's Asian American Heritage Month and these two are based off Chinese characters and Bruce Lee in a Japanese setting, but because there's also been this debate about Rock Lee getting snubbed in Shippuden, and right now people who consume Boruto on both the anime and the manga have noticed that his son Metal Lee is getting under focus in both his series, anime, and manga. So I want to break down if Rock Lee was neglected and talk about his son Metal Lee and find out if he's also being neglected. So type the Lees deserve better or Lee deserves better in the comments and let's get started. For part 1, Rock Lee, I think there doesn't need to be much of an explanation, although for people who haven't seen Naruto, I'll give you all the quick rundown why he was loved in part 1. He was introduced in the debatable second or third arc in the series as a new character showing up for the Chunin exams to see if the Genin were promoted to Chunin. And he was actually a year older than the rest of the main characters besides Kakashi. But his mentor guy held him back a year so they could be ready for the exams. He was able to defeat Sasuke and Naruto before his mentor stepped in, and he's also revealed to have a crush on Sakura. One-sided, unfortunately. During the Forest of Death, he helped Sakura when Naruto and Sasuke are both unconscious after Orochimaru's agents go after them. But after he gets overwhelmed, he's saved by the rest of Naruto's generation before Sasuke comes in with the curse mark. And during the preliminaries of the third round, he ends up fighting another one of the main antagonists of the arc in Gaara, who has a tailed beast inside of him similar to Naruto. And though he puts up a valiant fight and earns respect of almost everyone there, he barely loses and his arms and legs end up getting hurt that he either needs surgery or a vast medical improvement. Otherwise, he will never become a ninja ever again. So they're able to find one of the 3 famous ninjas from Kakashi's generation in Tsunade who helps him recover. And he joins the Sasuke retrieval team technically as a 6th Ranger to help Naruto by holding out Kimimaro before Gaara arrives to help him. But they almost lose to Kimimaro until his illness is too strong and they win by default. So, how much did Lee do during the second half of the series, aka Shippuden? Well, when Team 7 went to rescue Gaara, Tsunade was worried they would have problems, so she sent Team Guy as backup, and when they were attacked by the 30% clone of Kisame, Lee was able to disarm him before getting captured alongside the rest of his teammates, and Neji was able to free Lee while Lee was able to rescue Tenten before she suffocated. Then he and the rest of his team found the other 4 barriers in place but were ambushed by clones of themselves after they removed it, which the manga didn't show how they won, but the anime showed him complete a new technique called U Full Power, where he kicks the opponent in the air, then kicks them in the face, and then finishes them off with a powerful dropkick, which I believe was actually in Ultimate Ninja 4 as an ultimate ninja attack, so neat. But then he barely shows up again until the Pain arc where his team was away on a mission, which is debatable whether or not Team Guy would have been able to help the village stop the invasion, which I think they would have, which is part of why Kishimoto didn't have them there. Although I also think it's room for debate since even the anime tricked you guys in the opening. Not to mention that Guy insisted that the team would back up Naruto, but Katsuyu mentioned that Naruto didn't want anyone else to get involved. Then in the 5 Kage Summit arc, Lee joined Sakura, Sai, and Kiba to try and eliminate Sasuke themselves before his actions make the Lee village get involved in the war, but Sakura kind of gets them all turning on each other so she's able to knock them out to deal with it herself. So during the 4th Great Ninja War, he was assigned to the 3rd Division alongside Sakura and Guy and fights alongside Sakura, Kakashi, and Guy against Haku, which that version of that fight would have been cool. During the climax of the war, he does react to his teammate Neji dying and holds his corpse until Guy manages to get him to keep his tears and hold on to his feelings for Neji. And when he gets the chakra boost from Naruto, Lee charges forward with the Alliance to try to deal with Madara, repelling towards him and bisecting him with a powerful kick to temporarily destroy Madara's connections to the beast. Not to mention, he joined the rest of the Konoha 11 and attacking Obito with chakra, allowing him to use ninjutsu for the first time. And he is a bit apprehensive about it because it was his first time using it, but he was able to help out Naruto extract the tail beast chakra from Obito and, stop the holy tree from blooming at the time. He also went to save Guy from Madara's attack before realizing Guy was about to use the 8th gate and watched him proudly, but when Madara tried to fight Guy, Lee was able to listen to Minato about how the true Seeking Balls work so that he could use the 4 Hokage's Flying Thunder God Kunai in front of the chakra orbs to allow him to teleport most of them away, which would give Guy the opening to hurt Madara and use the Evening Elephant, and Lee gets Infinite Tsukuyomi where he dreams of beating Naruto and Neji in battle and earns Sakura love. Poor Guy. But hey, he was someone involved in the blank era from destroying a bunch of meteors with the rest of his newfound clan to raising a son in metal and being promoted to Jonin. So I think the big question becomes, was Lee neglected? I would say partially because he was able to do a fair amount of stuff, but he did have a huge absence in the first half of part 2, and it's not like he got much focus, but he was able to contribute. I think the big problem is his relationships with everyone until Neji dies gets a little bit unfocused. He doesn't get a proper chance to confront the people responsible for Gaara's fate, especially given their rivalry, or talk much with Gaara. In the manga during the war, he doesn't get that close final opponent to push his growth like Team 10 did, when the manga had a good opportunity in letting him fight Kimimaro, who was revived, because a fight like that would have shown how far Lee has come that he doesn't need Gaara's help to survive. Plus, I don't know if I touched upon this earlier, but There's a compelling argument that Lee had an abandoned plot point. Guy's teachings failed him against Gaara, not for lack of trying, he came close, but the big debate was whether or not Lee needed to evolve separately or come up with his own style to either distinguish himself from Guy, work within the 8th grade limitations to overcome that, or make himself stronger. Heck, in the third movie, he actually combined the 8th gates with weapons, which I actually think is a pretty neat compromise since he doesn't have to risk hurting his limbs. The funny thing is, in the Rock Lee spinoff, Lee actually does get to confront Guy about using an 8th gate technique that rivals Morning Peacock to do so. In the manga, he comes up with Morning Gorilla because the fists have a stronger and wider reach than Guy's Morning Peacock. Meanwhile, in the anime, then we're Morning Chicken because it's faster because the chicken rises into the morning before the peacock does. Makes sense in context. But there were a few things Kishimoto could have done to flesh him out a little bit more after part 1. So, I don't know if this is entirely true, but I feel like from what I've experienced, there are a lot of people in the Boruto community who just don't like Metal Lee, and I've never understood why that hatred became the way that it was, because he never did anything wrong. If anything, he's more underused than his dad was currently. I'm gonna have to talk about both the manga and the anime, because I feel like everyone agrees I'm gonna have to talk about the anime more than the manga with him, because in the manga, he's only in, 3 chapters? The first one, we see him getting prepared to fight and train, and he talks about being anxious. The second one, he fights Shinki, like we saw in the movie, and the third is, after the events of the movie, where you see him watching the sparring battle between Naruto and Boruto. That's it. Well, I will say this. Props to the anime for taking the anxious line and fleshing it out to be a central part of his personality. Anxiety did exist, but in the age of increasing awareness of mental health, I respect the anime for actually addressing the aspect of him, and he's even able to adjust his anxiety to not let it hinder his performance, even though it's still there, which, is actually realistic. So, what's the issue? Is Metal Lee and his team don't get any major focus in any of the focus arcs. And almost every time either he doesn't get focus, it's either his team overall or Iwabe and Denki, who actually get more to do than he does. Don't believe me? Academy arc. He does get focused on his social anxiety and messing up with his insecurities, getting possessed, and slowly unlocking the gates to glow red, implying that he can reach up to third gate before knocking himself out by accident and getting closer to the guys. His classmates take advantage of his weakness during sparring matches, and doing the true common practice that Denki struggles with, he actually trains with Denki to help him master it. For the missed school trip arc, there's not much to mention. I think he fought a few gang members, but that was it. In the graduation exams arc, he and Wasabi are able to use their speed to distract Anko long enough for Namida to KO her. In the Byakuga gang arc, Metal fought the thieves and Block went to save Denki, but injures his arm long enough to put them in the hospital, and Iwabe got suspended. And yeah, there was a subplot between the Byakuya gang and the Chunin exams arc where they got suspended for Iwabe's actions during those events, and them trying to prove that they're ready for the Chunin exams. The Momoshiki arc in the movie, well, for the exams, he was able to keep up with Shinki-sen before he used it to steal the flag from his team, so no fleshed out fight from them. And between the Momoshiki and Mitsuki's disappearance arc, he got episode 70, which people were making fun of because they legitimately thought Rock Lee was going to bust out all the 8 gates on his son for a training sparring session. And I'm actually going to see him explore him trying to use objects as a substitute for confidence, with his father calling him out and claiming that he couldn't use the 8 gates as he was now, leading to Guy discussing with him about how he got past his insecurities with his injury from the war. Rock and Metal fight, and the conditions were for Metal to hit him at least with 1 blow or he would never receive training for the 8 gates. And even though people were laughing at him, Metal was able to fight through the stares and laughter, still anxious but taking a more evasive and unpredictable style, which we have appropriately joked the anxiety fist, boosting his performance. Then in a spur moment, he instinctively unlocked the first gate, letting him hit Rock strong enough to blow him away and win, resulting in his father and honorary grandfather happy he found pride in himself. Good episode. But yeah, after this, you start to notice Metal's team focus is drastically underused. In the Stone arc, Inoshika had more focus, and when Sumeri and his team went to the Stone, the fight was already over. I'll give the Naruto Shippuden Parent and Child Day arc the pass because the novels were low stakes, plus at least entered the contest and got disqualified thanks to Metal's anxiety. Now, I'm not sure they could have won that. It is possible they could win, but let me know what you guys think. The Jugo arc was entirely focused on Team 7, Jugo in a sub-role from T15 with Sumeri leaving, skipping the Steam Ninja Scrolls adaptation, Konohamaru arc, and the One Tail and Sideswipe arc because naturally there's going to be much focus on those. So, we get to the car actuation arc, where, to be fair, Team 15 also didn't get a chance to do anything that much, but it's telling that while everyone else was fighting Kara, they had an episode they went to Orochimaru's hideout in order to get his card signed in order to prove themselves to a sick kid. Was it funny seeing them be scared crapless and still actually try to fight Suigetsu and prove to Orochimaru that he was even willing to sign it despite knowing how kind of questionable it was? Yeah, it was more of a team effort than a metal-focused one, but at least they did something, but again, not part of the major conflict of the series. And this didn't start bothering me until we got into the Chunin re-examination arc, aka the Chunin exam second arc. Now, I want to make a disclaimer when I say this. I am not mad that Denki and Iwabi made it to the finals. I'm questioning why the writers didn't even bother to try letting Metal get there. We didn't get to see how the anxiety got the better of him and how he was disqualified. It's like they didn't have the opportunity to let him get involved, although I know the animation team was drained from working on the Kawaki and Ishiki arcs, given that 50-episode stretch was hectic. With how many fights they had to animate, stalemate, and outside of the Iwabe versus Wasabi fight, they put more effort into Inojin versus Hoki, Denki versus Tsubaki, and especially Sada versus Chocho. But Metal didn't even get that. They could have had Sumire try to enter and improve her rank to improve herself as a member of the Scientific Ninja Division and fight Metal. Yes, you'd have to add a few more people, but it's like the writers intentionally enjoyed writing for Metal. Until we get to the Funato arc and the Great Sea Battle of the Mist arc. And just like that arc, my thoughts on Metal Lee are mixed to say the least. For starters, Team 5 are actually involved in a story arc mission for once. Metal gets to help Denki assemble the security puppets and stopping the Funato soldiers from taking hostages, and partnering him with Hebi Ichigo was a good idea since he's a golden boy while she's damaged. So between them saving each other, the cute scene where she fixes his spandex, her leaving out of fear and him trying to bring her back, them working together, her confiding in her backstory, living in a trash heap and having to fight to survive and feeling like her only talent was killing, when yet he reminded her of her skill in sewing. So, what's my problem? Hebi Ichigo dies. And like Kaguya's death, I'm still torn on this. But the big problem for me was that outside of the production problems, I do not harass animators, is that all that Metal did was cover for her. For a fight where she got fatally injured, you'd think this would be where he locks in and, I don't know, use the gates to protect someone who he cares about to help. But they just give the final fight and kill to Boruto and Buntan. And I get why they chose them, but we couldn't have Lee be more involved in a story arc that killed off the person he spent the most of the arc bonding with. To be fair, it did motivate him to be torn about fighting them even more over her death, and he was unsure about whether or not to avenge her or focus on helping his friend stop the war so there'd be less casualties. But he did ultimately make the choice that there would be no peace to her death if the war continued, as well as Kaguya's, as long as they continued fighting in the war. And it did encourage him to be inspired by Boruto's efforts to resolve matters as peacefully as possible, but this arc could have pushed his character so much more. But we haven't talked about Two Blue Vortex yet, and that's because he's not in it. The only one of the original 7 who has kids from chapter 700 besides Mitsuki is Rock Lee, who isn't there at all. It's a shame too, but this is a story where people have assumed certain characters weren't coming back, and eventually they did, like Koji, so I don't think it's impossible that Metal could be used in a sequel, but the question is, well, how? I have an idea that might piss some people off. Make Rock Lee devoured by a claw grime and make a shinju out of him. I'm serious. See, one of the smartest things about the new antagonists is because they're essentially doppelgangers that imprison the host because most of the cast has a connection to at least one of them in some degree. It makes the stakes for them all the more personal for trying to defeat them so that they can free their loved ones. And this works with Rock Lee becoming a shinju for multiple reasons. For starters, the shinju have a pro and a con where their abilities are similar to their counterparts but are much more deadly given their tree enhancements. But the downside is that they don't have as much refinement as their original selves. Like how Hidari doesn't have the Sharingan, so he can't use the Chirori as effectively. If the Shinju Rock Lee were to be real, he would have access to the strong taijutsu, but he probably wouldn't be able to activate the 8 gates given the level of training required for it, but the power gap might be enough to force Metal to try and use it against him. Second, this would give the manga a proper reintroduction to Metal and explain where he's been. Third, this would pay off well from the anime fight with Rock, where beating the challenge meant that he trained Metal to see how Metal could use the 8th gates, as well as show Metal has developed his own style that shows he's ready to surpass his father. The audience already has an emotional attachment to Rock Lee, so this would be a good way to have both of them in a story without having to need to kill off Rock Lee, because some people think that death automatically equals good writing. Oh, ultimately, here's my take. Rock Lee was underused in the second half, though not as bad as certain other characters, though Kishimoto definitely could have used him and gave him better screen time, even if small moments to shine before the war's climax. Meanwhile, with Metal Lee, while I appreciate the anime giving him some more focus, both it and the manga need to do more of him, and I'm hoping that Two Blue Vortex corrects that issue. But I'm leaving the conversation to you guys. What did you think about Rock Lee and Metal's treatment in the anime? Heck, I didn't even bring up the fact that the filler arcs liked Rock Lee, since the training exams of the past gave us Lee vs. Shura. That was a fun fight. But thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and BIP of Bizarre Interest Productions, signing off.